Well, coming up on today's show, Tesla raises their prices by nearly 20% in China. Over 18,000 EVs have been sold so far this year in France, and German car makers are being left reliant on others for battery cells. But first of all, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, the 10th of July edition of EV News Daily. It's Martyn Lee here with the news you need to know about electric cars and the move towards sustainable transport. First of all, some housekeeping. Just so you know, the first 4 fully charged live videos are now online from the kind of seminars / stage talks and presentations that there was at Fully Charged Live. Great edited versions of the highlights of those. Also, thank you to Leon Clarke, who just sent me a link a moment ago to the Nissan story. Nissan, according to the BBC article that he forwarded, have admitted falsifying data about car exhaust emissions at its Japanese factories. I'm going to pull together all you need to know about that on tomorrow's programme, but it will interest us as the Leaf is the best-selling EV model in the world. And a lot of news today, so thank you so much for your emails and comments. We'll do a bumper batch of those tomorrow. Otherwise, it would end up being half an hour long, and we try and keep them below 20 minutes on these podcasts, whether it's iTunes you're listening on or the usual podcast channels or YouTube. Hi as well, by the way, to Bubbles on email. Great name, by the way. Thank you for the discussion of Daimler. He says, as a German, the German in me hates hearing you say Daimler. He would say it Daimler. I don't know. I've heard it done both. Whichever way I do it, people tell me off. So I'll just do Daimler for going forward. And hi to Matt Gruby as well, who's been sending me some stuff about Australia. We'll talk about that on the show tomorrow. And Peter Mooney as well. Thank you so much for your email. We will get onto all of those tomorrow. But we want to start with some big news. In the last 24 hours or so, the UK has put forward its plan for its road to zero. Or should that be road to low emissions? Well, this is the good, the bad, and the uncertain. Every country around the world, wherever you're listening right now, is somewhere on the path to zero-emission transport. We know it'll happen at some point because they are non-renewables for a reason. They will run out. Fossil fuels, that's a non-negotiable. We will be using renewable energy at some point in the future. So that part isn't in doubt. We will all travel with zero-emission transport at a point in the future. The interesting thing is how quickly it'll happen and whether you, the car buyer, will make it happen quicker than the politicians want. Or maybe it will be regulation and government. Well, here in the UK, the government just released a very long-awaited Road to Zero transport strategy. Now, some hoped it would be a clear and definitive roadmap to the future. What do you think of this? Would it go down well where you're listening to the podcast? And are you ahead of the UK or behind us? Would this plan work for where you live? Or is this the road to nowhere? Let's dive in. Now, the talk of banning combustion engines is now out of the window. This was announced last year, and ministers didn't really know what they were announcing. They were saying we're all going to be driving EVs by 2030 or 2040. And then challenged on that by people who know, who say, well, do you mean hybrid or soft hybrid or plug-in hybrids or full BEVs? They were like, yeah, we'll get back to you. And they have got back to us. And they're not banning combustion engines in the UK. They're replacing the word ban with target or ambition. Now, the target for the UK is at least 50% of new cars to be ultra-low emission by the year 2030. So in 12 years' time, half of new cars sold don't even need to be zero emission. They need to be ultra low emission. The other half can still be really dirty diesel. And they also included some vague promises in this big old document they've been working on for months, with promises like all new cars and vans to have significant zero emission capability by 2040 and almost every car to be zero emission by 2050. Well, all new buildings, new homes, as well as street lights should be getting EV chargers. That is the promise that they will look into. Again, this isn't mandating it. It's simply they use the phrase where appropriate. Now, look, I think this is good news because it brings down the costs when you do a whole housing estate or a block of apartments or flats or office buildings, commercial premises. You integrate solar and storage and EV chargers and you can buy on bulk. It gets the cost down. It's a total no-brainer. It didn't need the government telling us to do this. There is no ban on combustion engines. The diesel lobby have won the day. They're going to be toasting a drink this evening because they got their own way. Now, The Guardian says that petrol and diesel hybrid cars will be permitted to be sold 2040 onwards. The government misspoke last year, and they've conceded on that one in a move that's really angered environmental campaigners, but was welcomed by the car industry. Well, companies in the charge point installation business are smiling. They're going to be sharing a £400 million charging infrastructure investment fund pot. I'm sure they're already writing their proposals to get a share of that money. Well, businesses retrofitting charge points will be able to claim a grant for 75% of the total cost. That's great news. No detail on or commitment on the incentives at the moment. The plug-in car grant here in the UK, you get £4,500 for a full electric car off the price of the car. It's more for vans, it's less for hybrids. That ends in October, and all they've said at this stage is they're going to look to continue it to at least 2020 in some form. Wow, they've worked on this for months, no commitment. You couldn't make it up. A review of all of this anyway is planned. It's in the diary for 2025. And my take on that is you have then built in uncertainty. You've gone, here's the plan, but you know what? In 7 years, we might change it all again. And businesses already facing Brexit here in the UK and leaving Europe and the thing, maybe even trading zones and customs unions and all those kind of things are facing uncertainty already. And then this plan, which was meant to build in certainty, has now put a review in place to say, oh, in 7 years' time, it might all change anyway. And that's not how you do long-term investment. In comparison, Norway, for instance, just to pick one example, will be phasing out all combustion cars by 2025. Greenpeace said the car industry are yet again being given a free pass and the targets are weak by any international standard. Now, the body whose job it is to fight for the car industry, and because the car industry is still combustion cars, ergo, they fight for diesel and petrol, they're called the SMMT, although they have said good things about electric cars in the past as well. Mike Hawes is their chief exec, and he said that the strategy recognised the vital role that conventional engines, including diesel, will play beyond 2040. That is morally obscene. He knows it. Everyone who works at the SMMT knows it about particulates killing people, the damage that combustion fuels do to the health of everybody in their way, and yet they are still promoting it. You know what? Don't hate the players, hate the game. They are being paid to do this. At some point in the future, the car industry will be EVs, and they'll be singing EVs' praises. And in fairness, they have said very positive things about EVs more recently, and I expect them to fight harder for them as more people are invested in them. But at the moment, they represent a big combustion engine lobby, and they are arguing for diesel way past 2040. My take on this, by the way, I know that I've been a bit down so far, and that's kind of not my style. I like to be super optimistic about where we're going. My take on this, for what it's worth, if anyone cares about my opinion, economics always wins. Economics always wins. Math wins. And really respectfully, maybe not respectfully, to the politicians who have... I think politicians have never occupied a lower estimation in the general consensus of people than in 2018, hence things like protest votes around the world. Most people haven't got a lot of time for politicians at the moment. You don't hear kids ever. What do you want to be when you grow up? A politician. Most people, and I'm generalising here, have a low, very low estimation of them because of the events around the world over the last 10, 15, 20 years. There's a political greenwash of policy. People see through that, by the way, of keeping the diesel manufacturers happy. None of this matters. None of what the politicians say matters, because whilst we've got car companies out there who are making great EVs that are cheaper to run, that will soon be the same price as combustion engines to buy, cars that are so much fun to drive as well, that last a long time, that don't cost as much to service, that make sense in every possible way, especially economics. Economics will win. So well done to the politicians for doing whatever they've done today. Really, not very much of using up a lot of printer ink, really, and not really getting to the what they needed to get to, which was a complete ban of petrol and diesel. Cheap motoring will win when people, whilst you and I want to move towards EVs for the sake of the environment and for the future and future generations. And we get that, right? But time after time, when surveys are done of why do you want to buy an EV, even of existing owners, why did you buy an EV? What's the best thing about owning them? The environment on that, when every time I see those surveys, the environment is like number 2, 3, 4, 5 on the list. number one, it's always economics. And ultimately, people are selfish and, I mean this in a nice way, will act in their own interest if it means more money for them and their family and their loved ones, which means buying an electric car very soon in the future. There's no point talking about 2030 or 2040 and hybrid car targets. It's all irrelevant. We aren't going to be past 2025 talking about these things. The largest pre-order in consumerism history was 500,000 people wanting a Model 3, and every single car maker wants a piece of that. Now, they don't want a piece of it before 2020 because of existing investments in petrol and diesel, but after that, the floodgates will open, and it's just all of the hot air from the politicians, none of it matters. All of this is going to be moo juice by 2025, let alone talk of 2040 and 2050. If we do give the politicians any credit, by the way, it would be in California for years and years and years of pushing emission standards and saying to car makers, if you want to sell your cars here, they've got to be cleaner. And also the European Parliament, which has put in strict new CO2 limits in place from 2020 onwards. Those, along with more recently, the Chinese regulations, that will drive the move initially. And after that, you, the consumer, when you make your buying purchase, you are going to drive it. You have got more power in your pocket and your wallet than any politician that is talking about 2050, not even a ban, targets for 2050. Shall we move on? I was just wondering whether that would work where you are. Maybe you're ahead or behind of the UK, but that's what happened today. It was big news. Well, moving on. In a response to President Trump's ongoing trade dispute between the US and China, electric automaker Tesla has raised prices of its vehicles in China by 20%. In the biggest trade war in economic history, it's being called. It's going to speed up investment in China by not just Tesla, but other automakers as well to avoid those tariffs. In France, electric vehicle sales have gone past 18,000 registrations in this year alone. According to Green Car Congress, after a few subdued months, the electric passenger car market rose significantly in June. The Renault Zoe still keeping its lead and continues to carry registrations of EVs, a 61% market share. Second place, Nissan Leaf. Third place, BMW i3. And that is 182 new registrations, 74 of those, so just less than half, with the range extender. Talking about the BMW i3, by the way, another one of those things that I love to do, and that's look at the mainstream press, the websites, how they talk about EVs. We did it yesterday with the Leaf, and today I see that Pocket Lints have actually bought themselves a BMW i3. I love that because then it's not a loan car from a press or a car maker that they've got to say some nice things about. They bought this. They're paying on the lease. Well, stamp on the accelerator, they say, and the i3 gives you its first surprise. It feels truly quick, leaping forward with the kind of abandon that's usually the reserve of sports cars, but with almost no noise. Our own unscientific traffic light Grand Prix over the past months suggests this is as quick or quicker than any other car on the road for the first 20 metres. On the subject of regen braking, which was new to them, they said this: after a while you start to actually think more about your driving. Lift off the pedal a little earlier so you don't need to manually brake. You start thinking ahead. In some ways, it's made us a better driver. Totally, completely agree with that. And on the topic of going back to a combustion car one day, Pocket Lint says this: getting back into a petrol or diesel feels genuinely old-fashioned. The noise, the vibration, the changing gears, the stopping at fuel stations, the idling in traffic, all are relegated to the past in an EV. Well, what did we do before YouTube? I don't know, because it's great. You can go on there and you can search for electric car Nürburgring and see what's coming up. And today, it was the turn of Porsche. Yesterday on the podcast, we were talking about the Mercedes EQC lapping the Nürburgring. Well, today, it's the Porsche, formerly known as the Mission E, which is an awesome name. Now it's called the Taycan, or Taycan it's spelled, but it's pronounced Taycan. It's hitting the 12.9 mile Nordschleife. The debut is set for early 2019. We first get to see the finished version of the Porsche. Production this time next year, they say, by which point, in 12 months' time, hey, I guarantee you, Elon will not have been able to keep stum about the new Roadster for another 12 months. At some point, off script, or someone's going to ask him a question, he's going to start raving about the Roadster. It's going to have some serious competition, but we can't wait to see what Porsche produce. Well, moving on to Ford, and Ted Canis is Ford's global director of battery electric vehicles. And he said in a recent interview with Engadget, with the Ford CEO, Jim Hackett, we're all in. We're going to be bigger, and we want to change the process. When it was compliance cars, says Ted Canis, there's nothing wrong with Ford Focus Electric. It's executed well, but it's not exciting. Let's make them awesome. Let's amplify what's best about that user group and make really awesome vehicles, said the guy who is heading up electric vehicles for Ford. If you thought he was going to follow that up with any specific cars, launches, details, no. Just like Ford have been doing for a while, just talking a lot about electric cars, saying, hey, we're going to make some. And then you wait for the next bit, and there isn't any more. Look, I'm a massive fan of Ford doing well because we know they can make cars in scale like VW. We want them to start making EVs in scale. But we need more than just interviews and ideas. Well, talking of Germany, by the way, and Reuters had a story yesterday which highlighted the biggest issue, they say, for those luxury German car makers. We mentioned VW and the likes of Mercedes as well, and BMW. Despite knowing that EVs have been coming, they've been on the cards for years, plans by a Chinese company to build a battery cell factory in Germany should serve as a wake-up call for the national car industry in Germany, whose lack of production capacity risks leaving it really exposed in a dawning era of EV mobility, says Douglas Busvine for Reuters. BMW has awarded a contract worth over €1 billion, that's 1.2 billion US dollars, to CATL. They're going to be making cells for electric cars, whilst Volkswagen also picked CATL and South Korea's Samsung and LG Chem. Their battery contracts in total, $25 billion worth of contracts, but ultimately having to outsource everything. And that leads us on to the next topic. Now, I missed this article. It was from Saturday last weekend, but I finally got round to catching up with Clean Technica, which is always awesome to read, by the way. I wanted to bring you this from Christopher Arcus at Clean Technica on the subject of advances in battery technology and whether Tesla is wrong to commit to both Panasonic and the Gigafactory. And it's something that is levelled as a criticism, I see, at Tesla. Well, he says it's no secret that the Gigafactory represents an important advantage in lowering battery cell costs and supplying battery cells for storage and EVs. But he says it's a myth that putting all of their eggs in the Gigafactory basket ties Tesla to one battery technology of lithium-ion batteries. We know Tesla produces the NCM and NCA cells at the Gigafactory, but even other tech like solid-state batteries is compatible with the existing production techniques and equipment. And I wanted you to check out the article, so I've put a link in the show notes, and it's one that I see so often of people making the argument of why we should be waiting for those big manufacturers to finally catch up. And they say, well, they're waiting for battery tech to improve, waiting for solid state. You wait till we've got solid state batteries, then we'll make a great EV. Now, when Elon announced that the Tesla Semi had certain specs and range, the head of Daimler Trucks said that the range and specs were against the laws of physics. I'm kind of paraphrasing from what I remember. Unless, he said, Tesla knew something which Daimler didn't. And that's the thing. Tesla genuinely do. At the shareholders meeting a little while ago, Elon said that those specs were actually pretty conservative. The Semi is already working out way better, and it's not going to be launched for a couple of years. As a pure electric car maker, they spend every second of every day working out how to make battery technology better. The hardware, the software, they're a Silicon Valley company. And rather than behave like car makers with their really slick, just-in-time supply chains and everything bought in from outside suppliers, Tesla and their investment in Gigafactory have pushed the technology themselves rather than buying it in. That's given them control, flexibility, the ability to scale, and you don't know what new technology they're pursuing as well. I put a link to the article in. That's just a quick, it's a long article and it's well worth a read if you like the kind of battery tech. And finally, let's end on because I've been a little bit serious today. I know that, because politicians annoyed me with their wishy-washy claims. Let's end with something a little light-hearted. Someone at Mashable clearly has too much free time on their hands, right? Because they've been keeping tabs on everything Elon Musk has done in 2018, or what they call the muskiest moments of the year. Well, the highlights for me, looking at the article, SpaceX had that monumental successful launch of the Falcon Heavy rocket, and then the Tesla Roadster and the astronaut, which reportedly disappeared into deep space not long after. Elon became the it couple at the Met Gala with musician Grimes. There was a nerdy joke that brought them together via Twitter. The memes, the relationship spawned his own personal Grimes playlist. It's so Elon. Selling Not a Flamethrower at $500 each and having to rename them to get round regulations, but the regulations being powerless now that he's called them Not a Flamethrower. In May, he tweeted about creating a website that would rate the truth of any article online and track the credibility score of each journalist, editor and publication. He then filed a lawsuit against a former employee who had admitted to Tesla about installing malicious code on servers to leak private data to unnamed parties and the press. And finally, most recently, a farting unicorn. Those and more in the muskiest moments of 2018. I mean, we're only 6 months in. Well, like I say, we'll get to all of your feedback and emails tomorrow. It's been a long one already. By the way, every previous 175 episodes of the podcast are on iTunes as podcasts on Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, the blog at evnewsdaily.com, and hello if you listen as the audio on YouTube. If you subscribe on any of those places, you're getting it first and free and automatically. And if you want to catch up on the socials and say hi and have a chat, just search EV News Daily. You'll find me on Facebook, LinkedIn and Twitter. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch you tomorrow.